Yeah, my dog's asleep and I don't want to wake him up so he doesn't make noise, so I hope you enjoy a snoring pit bull in the background. He's so loud. When I was a teenager watching DeviantArt ranting, a lot of the content creators and the videos that they made during that time just rubbed me the wrong way because it seemed like just a bunch of petty bullying and spiteful cliques ganging up on an individual over something completely stupid. And here I am on my 29th birthday watching the art commentary community, and I've seen the same pattern of nonsense of this current generation of teenagers, and even more pathetic, I see adults my age who have clearly not grown up and are the same toxic shitheads that they were in middle school and high school, minus having a YouTube channel. Yeah, just kidding, this whole video is pre-recorded. I'm not spending my birthday making this video. I'm actually in Fan Expo for New Orleans, getting in line to meet Giancarlo Esposito, the actor for Castillo in Far Cry 6, while wearing my Far Cry 5 cosplay, getting my copy of the game autographed. Yay. But no, seriously, like, DeviantArt ranting commentators from back in the day in the 2010s, I still see them, and they are continuing being the same toxic people that they were, just on different platforms. Like, seriously, some of you bitches got canceled for the behavior you're still currently displaying in your early to mid-30s, which just shows some people just don't learn. But we're not here talking about them. I'm here to talk about what I currently see in the art commentary community, which I find really annoying and pointless, is people wanting to bully artists that are going through their art regression period, or sometimes just other things that are completely pointless and stupid. Art regression phase, still learning anatomy, still learning shading, still like just learning line art, weights and stuff. Basically things that are perfectly natural and normal for every artist's journey. People in the art commentary community are turning that into a punishable call-out offense. Like it's something you need to get canceled over. Especially being extremely hostile towards younger artists and people who are starting their art journey regardless of their age. Y'all are just unnecessarily hostile and unwelcoming to them learning this skill set, and gee, you wonder why people don't want to learn it to draw anymore, and they're rushing to the nearest AI art program they can get their hands on. And for this video, I want to talk about artists having an art regression phase. For those of you that don't know, art regression is pretty self-explanatory. It's something every artist is going to go through at one point or another. Basically, art regression is when you haven't worked out your art muscles, resulting in you just falling out of practice, aka you get a little rusty. You forget how to do certain things, and you just need a refresher on how to like do a certain skill set. It's just natural skill regression that's going to happen when you fall out of practice. When this happens, you forget or sometimes you struggle to remember how to do a certain technique. Your art becomes less detailed and less elaborate. When this happens, this is not a sign that you need to give up being an artist and never draw again for the rest of your life. It just means maybe you should go back and learn the basics depending on where you recognize that you're struggling. If you're struggling with remembering how to do shading, go back and relearn and study shading. If you're struggling with perspective shots and backgrounds, go back and study perspective shots and backgrounds. As for what causes people to enter their art regression phase, this can be for all sorts of reasons. Like maybe the artist is just going through some mental health problems and they don't feel motivated to draw, or real life obligations are just keeping them too busy and they don't have enough free time to set aside just for drawing or a simple doodle. Or in some cases, you have people that draw too much, putting a lot of stress on themselves, especially when they're trying to meet daily upload deadlines, and they just completely burn themselves out, and that definitely can be a motivation killer. Especially when you have ADHD and it just physically hurts you to concentrate on something you just don't feel motivated to do. There's also the very common and easy to understand phenomenon known as art block. You can have all the time in a single day to draw, you can own so many sources of inspiration on your shelves, but art block just prevents you from picking up a pen. Again, especially when you have ADHD, that's just killing your motivation for all sorts of reasons. An artist's worst critic is themselves, and when we don't feel confident in our artwork, we just don't feel motivated to draw something new or keep practicing, causing us to go lengthy times in our lives where we just don't draw. And of course, that's naturally going to recur in art regression when we finally feel motivated to start drawing again, but we forgot a lot of techniques that we've learned over time. There are different types of regression. For example, literary regression, where once you're out of high school and you stop reading books since you're no longer in an environment that's forcing you to read, you kind of slow down how many words you can read a minute, and your reading comprehension skills tend to diminish since you're out of practice. It's like when you've graduated and you've been out of school for a few years, you tend to forget everything or a good chunk of what you learned in school over the years. When it comes to literary regression, just because at one point in your life you were able to eat up a 300-page book in under 2 hours doesn't mean you can still read the same way if you go a year or longer without reading a book. If you go a significantly long time without reading a book, you're going to notice reading is a bit more of a struggle the next time you pick one up and feel motivated to read. At some point or another, a person is going to go through a regression phase. Drawing, reading, losing fluency in a second language, playing a sport, it doesn't matter what it is. People are going to regress if they fall out of practice, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a little wake up that if you want to get back into these things, maybe you should go back to the basics and understand it's going to take time and patience for you to get as good as you were or even better. Now, when it comes to art regression, for some reason, the art community, especially over on TikTok, wants to treat it like a punishable offense you need to be dragged out in public and put in the stockades for so everyone can shame you. Whether the person is an artist or someone who doesn't draw at all notices that someone seems to be going through an art regression phase, the internet just wants to attack that person as if attacking them is somehow going to make their art return to standards. I don't understand why the reaction when someone notices that an artist is going through a regression phase, or maybe their art style is just changing through experimentation, or they prefer a simpler style, the response is to bully that person. It's giving, when I get older, I'm going to be that shitty parent that's going to verbally abuse my child and call them ableist slurs when I notice their grades are slipping and I'm not happy. So my reaction is to apparently call them a dumb fuck and cutting off their phone because I see that's going to get their grades up as I'm cussing them out and threatening to beat their ass if their grades don't improve. Yeah, parents verbally abusing their kids isn't going to help bring their grades up, and neither is sending a bunch of death threats or making TikToks posting the artwork of an artist with captions making fun of said artist that's going through art regression period is going to help their art look better to your standards. As I mentioned earlier, the artist could be going through some personal stuff, or maybe they're just too busy and they don't have the free time that's killing their motivation and affecting their performance. Like with the comparison I made, if you're struggling in school and you know your parents verbally abusing you and calling you hurtful names, mocking what they perceive to be your lack of intelligence is not going to help motivate you to study and bring your grades up. As I mentioned earlier, the artist could be going through some personal stuff that's killing their motivation, or maybe they're just too busy and they don't have plenty of free time to draw, and that's obviously going to be affecting their performance. Like with the comparison I made, if you're struggling in school and you know your parents going off yelling, verbally abusing you, and calling you all sorts of hurtful, ableist things, mocking what they perceived is you having a lack of intelligence, is not going to help you feel motivated to study and bring your grades up, how is doing pretty much the same bullying, hurtful tactic and threatening abuse or sending death threats to an artist that is in a supposed regression phase going to help their art be more pleasing for their audience? You don't know what somebody is going through, and you don't know the reason why their art is regressing. And it's not always regression. Sometimes it's when someone is experimenting with their style, trying to change up new ways on how to draw. Especially when an artist is starting to prefer a more simpler art style, which leads to the common negative misconception about art regression is that a simpler style equates to being lazy. Moving on to a simple art style is not a sign of art regression. It doesn't mean that somebody is being lazy. With the amount of shit that VivziePop got about her art style being overly detailed and too complicated, it's not a shocker that people hearing this are going to aim for a more simple art style to avoid that type of hate and backlash when it comes to the harsh criticism aimed at VivziePop's art style, which is not simple. Practicing or even regressing to a simpler art style is not a bad thing. It can be a beginning artist's way of practicing and studying the basics, and it could be a way for regressing artists to refamiliarize themselves with what they are lacking in their work. Or it can just be a simple case of personal preference. Not everybody aims to draw in super realistic, hyper-detailed art styles. Some people just prefer a simple art style, and there is nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to find something that's not your cup of tea, but when you come across something that's just something you don't like, do your best to refrain from giving that artist hate and just move on to something you like instead of wanting to tear somebody down that draws in a simpler art style because you personally don't like it. Okay, Karen, can you put your inner Karen away and not let her come out? Just because you dislike simpler things doesn't mean somebody committed a personal hate crime against you and you need to punish them and just let the world know they're a bad person simply for not drawing in a way that suits your personal preferences. Calm down, Karen. It's not the end of the world. I mean, y'all really do, like, the way you just go out of your way to hurt somebody in petty retaliation because they drew something that doesn't impress you, you do act like Karens. Art regression is just regressing back to a less developed skill set mindset, while choosing a simpler art style is a conscious choice. They are not the same thing, and neither one of them are punishable offenses. That means someone needs to be cyberbullied or the target of a witch hunt. It always seems like the art community is always looking for new excuses to bully people. Like, can y'all just not bully people? Can we not treat people the way that we would hate to be treated? Because some of y'all out here are expecting a free pass to abuse other people. But when the tables are turned, you will cry every oppression or mental health crisis to get people to leave you alone. Like, seriously, treat people the way you want to be treated. It's not a hard concept. And of course, I do understand a lot of you that do this are just doing it for the attention because your parents don't give you attention, nobody wants to be your friend, and no one wants to claim you as their significant other. If you're out here claiming that you support artists, then you need to be kinder to beginning artists and people that you think are going through art regression phases. And I'm not just talking about children, adults too, because ageism is a thing in the art community I wish more people would just make a big deal over. Just because I'm 29, that doesn't mean I'm going to be at the same skill level as Abigail Larson, because art is a skill that you need to practice over time, not something you're genetically going to master when you hit a certain age. Common sense doesn't seem to be so common anymore. It doesn't matter how old you are. When you are doing something for the first time, you're not going to be good at it, and it's going to take time and patience for you to get better. So for anyone watching this, art regression is not a big deal. It's not a crisis or a sign that you need to give up being an artist. You can recover from art regression with practice, and if necessary, going back to the basis and familiarizing yourself with them. You just need to regain the knowledge and the muscle memory, and all that will come back. It's just going to take time. It sucks that you have to relearn all that, but it's necessary if you are serious about getting back into being an artist. Art regression can affect your performance depending on how long you've been away from drawing. And if you're someone who has art block, I recommend finding something like these prompt books that I found at my local Barnes & Noble. Something I plan to do when experimenting with art block, or I'm just bored and want to accomplish finishing a drawing, I'm just going to randomly pick a number between 1 and 301. For example, if I pick 103, I draw whatever the prompt wants. Using 103, I look at the drawing book and that would be a skeleton. In the writing book, it just gives me a question and I can come up with an idea for an illustration that fits the writing prompt. Of course, you don't need both of these books, and it doesn't have to be like the same number if you do use both books. It can just be a combination of numbers until you find an illustration idea that you think you can do. And there's always the option to have a no-stress sketchbook. Self-explanatory, it's a sketchbook where you just doodle literally anything, and there's no expectations for it to be perfect since it's only for your eyes and you have no intention of sharing it with anybody. And if you're having one of your ADHD spells or you just severely lack motivation, please do not force yourself to draw, because all that's going to do is just get you burnt out. Forcing yourself to draw is just going to stress you out, and that's not good for you. In regards to art regression phenomenon, people, it's up to the artist and their knowledge when it comes to them deciding whether or not they're going through an art regression phase. It is not something for you to decide if you don't like that their art looks a little different. You as an audience member don't know what the artist is going through or struggling with, therefore it's not up for you to say someone is going through an art regression period. It could just be something as them changing up their art style because it's their personal preference to do so, or they just want to experiment. For those of you watching this, and if you are going through your art regression phase, that doesn't mean you're a bad artist or for some reason you're not a bad person. It sure as hell doesn't mean you're a bad person. Like, just take breaks if you need to try going back to the basics and seeing where you're struggling with and what you need to relearn. It's perfectly natural for people to lose a skill when they fall out of practice, and I don't know why the internet wants to treat it like it's something you need to be put in the stockades and publicly humiliated for. This gross hostile treatment because people are learning. This gross hostile treatment because people are learning leads to people being scared of trying something new or to make mistakes. If you are saying you support artists, then you need to do so with kindness, encouragement, and compliments, not tearing someone down and genuinely trying to hurt them. Alright, that's really all I have to say about this topic. If there's any other dramas or situations in the art community you'd like to hear my opinion over, feel free to leave recommendations or suggestions in the comment section down below. Now, if you would excuse me, I'm gonna get into Amir Talai's line and get my promo Alistair card autographed by him. Bye!